Story 1. My English teacher in the 11th grade was sleeping with the entire girls' basketball team in exchange for straight A's. I actually failed English that year, but when that made the news, my school said I didn't have to go anymore because he wasn't doing the grading properly. Everyone who had his class got a B. Story 2. One year, in exam days, they were trying to add a new method to prevent cheating where a man from the administration comes to every class before every exam and collects students' phones, while sticking a sticker with a number on each phone and giving the same sticker to the student so he can get his phone after school without anyone taking someone else's phone that looks alike or something. This was actually working at first, until one day, some guy sneaks into our high school and came as the man who collects the phones while he wasn't. He stole so many phones and then left. Holy crap! Imagine the thrill of going classroom to classroom in disguise stealing phones. You reckon the real inspector was in on it? Probably not. There were multiple inspectors so that everyone starts their exams on time. If a real inspector came and asked people for their phones and they said someone else came and took them, he'd think that another inspector just collected from his class by mistake. And that's what happened. He just said, "Oh, all right, good luck with the exam," and went to the next class. Story 3. Freshman year, a junior accused the PE teacher of assaulting her after hours in the locker room. He was put on leave and eventually got off on a technicality. Senior year, there was a freak snowstorm in April, during which the quietest and nicest stoner in our class went missing. A day later, they found his car in a ditch, and a week later, when the snow melted, they found his body. He'd crashed and, in his presumed high AF state, gotten out to walk for help with no coat on. He eventually found a phone pole and sat down against it to rest, and was believed to have frozen to death in the storm. Seeing his mom at her only child's funeral still haunts me. Story 4. My middle school banned hugging and hand-holding during course changes because it blocked the hall. In protest, all the 8th graders stood up and hugged each other during their lunch period. A bunch of students got detention. Made the cover of the Charlotte Observer. Story 5. Some students broke into a local elderly reverend's home to rob him, thinking he was away. He sadly was not, and they proceeded to bludgeon him and his wife to death while they were sleeping with baseball bats and beer bottles. They were caught pretty quickly, and although their names legally could not be published because they were minors, everyone, including the local media, knew who committed the crime. Media caused a circus at our school for weeks, harassing any student for comment. Many did because they thought it was cool. Although these three kids, 13, 14, and 15, were known to cause trouble, no one ever suspected they would be capable of a double homicide. Story 6. We had a computer teacher slash football assistant coach who was just blasted all day, had so many DUIs he had to get rides to work, but was the cousin of the superintendent, so he kept his job. Let's just say that when he crashed a student's car in the parking lot because he convinced them to let him borrow it, that was the beginning of the end of it. It was a small town. The scandal is that the super tried to cover it up by trying to convince the kid to take the heat for it. To no one's surprise, the kid was not convinced. They let him stay on as super for another 2 years. Story 7. In middle school, 8th grade, early 2000s, one of the hot girls sent a couple of nude pictures to her boyfriend, and it wasn't long until half the school had them. Police ended up becoming involved to make sure all copies were destroyed. In high school, there was a little scandal involving the teachers and a teachers' club called the Hot Tub Club. Faculty members that had hot tubs would host a weekly hot tub party with other hot tub owners. Turns out, they were all getting wasted and having a swinging party every Wednesday. Somebody's spouse found out about it, and there was a huge exodus of hot tub teachers my senior year. The main people involved with the photo were reprimanded but not charged. The girl had a sit-down with a counselor to discuss what happened, and we all had a big assembly to discuss the consequences that could happen if people shared those kinds of images. It scared a lot of kids straight. Nobody was fired from the school for being in the hot tub club. Teachers left because it was convenient timing with the opening of another high school, and there was constant babble about it. Just for clarity, this all happened in a small town in Western Canada. By the looks of my inbox, both are not uncommon occurrences. Story 8. A kid in my senior year short story class, who sat directly behind me, was charged with the stabbing, beheading, and burning of one of his friends/drug dealer. I remember the day like it was yesterday, sitting in my short story class when my teacher came in tears because she just heard the news. Students didn't find out about it until later. I actually have a friend who testified in his trial because he purchased the murdering materials at the hardware store she worked at. Story 9. This happened between my sister and brother graduating, so it would have been 1996 or 1997. The high school AG teacher started dating a student at some point. Everyone knew about it, and the parents consented. Our high school was, and still is, small enough to still participate in senior trips, and the AG teacher went along as a chaperone when his girlfriend was a senior. They shared a hotel room when I believe the student was still technically a 17-year-old minor. At the time, I remember my parents being rather put off by it, but they still hired the guy as a summer farmhand. I don't remember if he was fired or stepped down, but by the time I made it to high school, we had a different AG teacher. They got married and had a child, divorced maybe 5 or 10 years ago. Their kid goes to our high school now. I don't know why it wasn't a huge deal at the time, but no one really raised a stink or threatened to call the authorities. Today, it feels like a case of grooming by a predatory farm boy. Story 10. A teacher had an affair with a student. She was arrested and released on bail. Then, a few days later, she sent an email to other teachers saying it wasn't an affair, but that she was actually being assaulted by the student and blackmailed. She even attached screenshots of texts. Later that day, she murdered her husband and committed suicide. Story 11. First week of high school. In PE class, the first section was swim. Wasn't my class, but the class after. This kid was playing a game with his friends in the water. Who could hold their breath the longest? He was going up for air and hit his head on the pointy part of the gutter, and never made it to the surface. Friends didn't notice. The teacher didn't notice. Eventually, football players coming back to the locker rooms noticed. He ended up dying. The teacher was fired, although I wouldn't fully blame him, as he was attending and teaching the kids who didn't know how to swim or weren't strong swimmers. One adult for over 60 kids? That's the school's fault. Story 12. I was in 4th or 5th grade and someone sketched in the middle school bathroom not to go to school on Friday or I will bang bang. This was then brought to the attention of the county and state police, and we didn't have school that day, and the police searched everyone's lockers for a firearm. This was in Pennsylvania. They were never caught, and I do not believe they found a weapon. This was also at Derry Area Middle School while I was at Grandview for elementary. Story 13. This kid was taking his GCSEs, important exams in England until you get older and realize they mean nothing. Whilst at an exam, some kids got onto his phone, went onto his notes, and found a 4,000-word document consisting of his fantasies with other girls in his year. Clearly paid attention in English as there was some clever wordplay, like comparing his D to some world-famous landmarks. The screenshots found their way into a lot of group chats. There were about 20-odd screenshots, to put into context how long it was, and it basically acted as a vag repellent for the rest of his time at the school. Story 14. Back in high school, the entire football team was almost expelled because one girl gave BJs to every single one of the players in the locker room. Supposedly, they were all in a circle, and the girl was just going around to each person. The kicker? The girl's brother was on the team, and he let it happen. It's my understanding that the brother didn't partake in it, but he was effectively forcing her to not stop until she was done with everyone. The team ended up not getting in any major trouble, but the girl was suspended for a hot minute. Story 15. A guy in year 10 made a statement that the more compact a group of people are, the higher the death toll would be in a shooting. And we were genuinely talking about shootings, and somehow people mistook it that he was going to do it. It was a joke, and everyone was playing along at first. Cut to 11 months later, he was in year 11, and the whole school knows. Rumors got out, the truth was beyond twisted, and changed into something different. Kids were actually scared to come in. Parents were angry, teachers were anxious. They had to search the kid. They kicked him out 9 days before he finished for good. was still allowed to do exams but had to do it separately from everyone else. The police were involved and it made the news, but the news article is completely fake and bullcrap. He also wasn't allowed to prom. This was around 4 to 5 years ago. He told me he was doing a lot better now. He went to a better school for sixth form. He says while he has moved on with his life, he will never forgive the bastards. Also, we live in England, and guns are much harder to get, especially to the average person who knows nothing about how to get guns. Story 16. My former high school got on the news for having a history teacher lie for 4 years about being a decorated war hero. The guy claimed to not have one, but 2 Purple Hearts, among other things, and never even served a day in the military. Edit. I can't directly link to articles because of doxing, but I'm sure you can find it on Google. But it gets juicier. The truth came out because his ex-wife exposed him, sending evidence that he was making it all up to local news stations and the school. Why'd she do it? The history teacher was having an affair with another teacher in my school. We had a lot of weird teachers at my school, but I think this story shows just how much the administration hardly vetted teachers. Like, holy crap. We also had a guidance counselor get the boot for being a racist, but that's another story that did not get as much publicity. Story 17. One weekend, a couple of kids from the hockey team had a sleepover. One of the older boys from the high school targeted them. He tied them up, assaulted them, slit their throats, and set the house on fire. One of the boys survived and is an incredible person. He's the chief of a fire department and has done motivational speaking. The murderer is now out on full parole. Story 18. My religion teacher was relocated after rumors spread that he harassed a female student and hit a male student. I never found out if those rumors were true, but I mean, there had to be something because teachers don't just get relocated in the middle of a school year. He was an a-hole, so I wouldn't put it past him. In Germany, it's super hard to get fired as a teacher. I think you need a prison sentence to actually get fired, and that's why he was only relocated. Story 19. Here I was, thinking the guy hacking a teacher's computer and receiving exam answers was a big deal. This thread proved otherwise. Edit, because people are asking. There was this guy in high school, pretty shy, and didn't have too many friends. Was always trying to fit in. Kind of a poser, but in an insecure way. Let's call him Pumpkin Pie for privacy reasons. So, one day, Pumpkin Pie had the genius idea to impress his class and make them like him more. To get the Kim geography teacher and retrieve the exam question from his school account. He used a USB stick with a program on it that retrieves saved passwords from most browsers, Chrome, IE, Edge wasn't a thing yet, Firefox, etc. He waited for the perfect moment to plug it in. The teacher was taking a quick bathroom break. The entire class saw it and made up some excuse. I don't remember what he said. Everyone kind of forgot about it. He checked the teacher's school account every day for a couple months, until finally, the teacher uploaded the exam questions. Pumpkin Pie downloaded the exams, then, and this is where he effed up, he gave them to people in his class that he liked. Those people started talking, and eventually people from other classes started asking Pumpkin Pie if he could get the answers for their class too. So then exams come around. He asked his classmates not to make it too obvious that they knew all the answers. Of course, they did. They all had way higher grades than usual. One day, he received a call from the school, which never happened before. Basically, they said, "Hi, Pumpkin Pie, you need to come to the school and talk to the principal right now." He asked why, and then his heart dropped as she said, "Because it looks like you committed fraud." Apparently, they saw the discrepancy in the grades and went looking in the logs of the teacher's account access and found that it was accessed from an IP address which Pumpkin Pie also logged in from. Dumb guy didn't even use a VPN. Then he realized how much he had messed up. See, he had just turned 18, which meant that he would be treated as an adult should the police ever get involved. Anyway, he went to school and had a really hard decision to make. Either the whole class would have to redo the exam, or he gave the names of the people he gave the exams to, and only they would have to retake it. He chose the latter, and everyone hated him for it. Him and the classmates involved weren't invited to the graduation ceremony. Oh, and the hacked teacher was considering pressing charges for privacy violation. Somehow, he managed to convince the teacher not to. He is so lucky. Anyway, he was already insecure, and at this point, he just couldn't look any of his classmates in the eyes anymore. He ended up moving countries eventually, and now he uses a dumb alias online whenever he talks about it, something with a pumpkin. Not sure why at this point, since it's pretty obvious he's talking about himself. Story 21. A kid was busted having entered the system trying to change his grades. I think there was a claim of computer addiction, but he wasn't allowed on a school computer for the rest of his time at the high school. A teacher was known for trying to pick fights with students. I called out his bullcrap and he was given a slap on the wrist, but he didn't try it again after that. There was a student who was accused of having a bomb that was a complete fabrication. Outcome was ridiculously blown out of proportion. The guy was a bit of an outsider and had made a duct tape top hat. Someone made a sarcastic comment about him smuggling a bomb in it. He responded in the same level of sarcasm. Someone gets it in their head he has a bomb, and they decide to kick him out of school because of a viable threat. Story 21. I was in 8th grade at the time, but the high school I would be attending the next year had a massive hazing scandal that made international news overnight. A group of junior girls trying to join the Powder Puffs went to play football against the seniors. Instead of playing, they got the crap kicked out of them, were forced to sit in a huddle on the ground while paint and animal intestines were thrown at them, and one girl even had a bucket put over her head when it was hit with baseball bats. I heard later on she suffered permanent hearing loss. Someone recorded it. This was before smartphones, so someone had a literal camcorder and released it to the media. The senior girls that were identified were suspended, many of them losing college admissions, and some parents were arrested when it was found out they supplied alcohol. When I started high school, we had to endure multiple school assemblies every year about how hazing is bad, and participate in a week-long seminar about being more caring and considerate of our fellow students. My school had a similar situation, but male students were making paddles in woodshop class and using them to paddle incoming freshmen. These weren't the thin hazing paddles that you sometimes see in movies. They were 2x6s, with holes drilled in them and a carved handle on one end. One of the ones that they showed us in our assembly the next year was so big it took 2 hands to wield it. One kid had his tailbone broken from being hit so many times. The football coach was also the woodshop teacher, and he kept his job, but he was no longer allowed to coach football or teach woodshop. Our state champion football program disintegrated. He was allowed to start coaching again a few years ago, and they are almost back at the level of where they were, and there's no more hazing. That we know of. There was also a car accident where one kid died, and 2 others were in a coma after a pre-homecoming event. It wasn't school sanctioned, but it happened on the football field. There was a lot of alcohol involved, and they were on a winding country road. We also had a girl get hit and die when some high school kids were drag racing. Story 22. When I was in grade 9 back in 2009, there was a whole school fight that lasted the whole break into the next session. There were even 3 teachers involved. The injury rate was ridiculous. There were over 15 broken noses, 2 broken ribs, and some even stretched their optical nerve. A teacher and a student were making out in the classroom, which had a window wall. A whole bunch of people saw and watched it. There was once a fight between 2 guys. The one guy DDT'd the other guy 3 times on tiles. He lost his gold tooth. Someone stole it and came back a week later with the gold tooth in his mouth. Those are the first that came to mind, but a lot of other stuff happened. By the way, I went to an all-boys school. Story 23. A friend's stuff kept going missing, like books and pens. It didn't stop, even after multiple complaints from him, and the teachers didn't really care. His mom screamed at the teachers and the principal and did her own investigation and concluded that it was a boy who stole from that guy. The principal decided to call the male students' parents to talk to them. After a year, it turns out that the thief was a girl, and she yeeted the guy's stuff out the window because the guy was bullying her. Story 24. The Pooh Bandit. Someone made a huge mess in the boys' bathroom in my high school, like a full-scale crap horror show. The walls, the stalls, the bowls, and the sinks. We had a big assembly about it, and our deputy head teacher was urging whoever knew anything to come forward. The cleaners refused to go near it, and they had to get industrial cleaners in suits to come in. He would not let it go. He was an ex-cop, so saw it as a detective-style mystery. He'd randomly pull people out of class to interview them. He'd lose his mind in assemblies. He just would not stop. You could see even the other teachers cringe when he's still fixating on it 6 months later. We'd all laugh every single time he mentioned it, and of course, the name the Pooh Bandit was born. People would accuse their friends of it for a laugh, and one time this really sweet chunky kid got accused of it. He took it well, and saw the funny side, which gained him a lot of popularity in the end. I'm 30 now, and if I ever mentioned the Poop Bandit to any single person that was in my school, they'd instantly remember and start laughing. I remember one time someone said, "I am the Poop Bandit," in assembly, and then another person stood up and said the same thing, and then another, and another. It was one of the funniest things I've ever encountered. Mr. Pearson never did find the Poop Bandit. It forever remains a cold case scandal.